Claws in the Mist. Author's note: I discovered Robert E. Howard's Conan stories at 13, and his prose changed everything for me. His ability to create vivid, fast-paced action with economical yet powerful language left me awestruck. The way he could paint entire worlds with just a few deft strokes of his pen made me a lifelong fan. Now, as I explore writing myself, I've attempted to capture some of that magic in this unconventional Thanksgiving tale. This story builds off of the folklore of the tribes that lived near Plymouth at that first celebration. Maushop was a benevolent giant who created Nantucket Island by emptying sand from his moccasins. Pukwudgies were small humanoid creatures in Wampanoag folklore who resemble little trolls. They were known for their mischievous and sometimes malevolence towards humans. They are said to be able to shapeshift and turn invisible. Asterisk. The man knelt and eyed the spore on the forest floor, running his fingers gently over it. He was a giant of a man, with a broad, barrel-like chest and shoulders as vast as the trunks of the oldest pines. His skin was the deep, burnished hue of river clay, weathered and etched by years of battle and the harsh elements of the coast. His hair, a wild mane as black as a raven's wing, fell to his shoulders in thick waves, bound with sinew and woven with eagle feathers. His eyes were a piercing, stormy gray, glinting with the fierce intensity of a warrior but tempered by the wisdom of ages. As if he had looked into the heart of the world and understood its secrets. A powerful jaw and high, chiseled cheekbones gave his face an aura of rugged nobility, and his mouth, often set in a grim line, could twist into a wry grin or snarl with the menace of a hunting wolf. Scars criss-crossed his muscular limbs and torso, each a testament to a battle fought and survived. Telling the silent story of a man forged in the crucible of strife and shaped by the unforgiving hand of the wilderness. He let out a soft grumbling growl as his hand flexed on the haft of the war club in his hand. He clutched the handle of the stone knife that sat in its sheath at his hip. He lifted his eyes and scanned the trees lining the clearing that he knelt in. A woman's scream ripped through the forest air. The warrior leapt into action, bounding across the clearing and plunging into the woods beyond. He deftly sped through the trees, skillfully navigating downed logs, bushes, and boulders. Within minutes he found himself in another clearing. He drank in the scene before him. A woman stood alone in the shadow-choked clearing, her breath coming in quick, controlled bursts. The creatures had surrounded her, small, wiry forms slinking out from the underbrush like malevolent spirits. Their gray, sinewy bodies moved with an unsettling grace, their glowing eyes alight with a wicked glee. They had large pointy ears, large wide noses. Their growls revealed rows of needle-like teeth. Flint-tipped darts glinted in their clawed hands, poised to strike. The woman gripped her stone spear tightly, her muscles coiled like a panther about to spring. Her dress, streaked with dirt and torn at the hem, whipped around her in the wind, yet she held her ground, unyielding. With a feral cry, she lunged forward, the spear arcing through the air to sink deep into the chest of the nearest attacker. The creature shrieked, its eyes widening in a grotesque mask of pain as it crumpled into the leaves. Spinning, she tore her weapon free, parrying a dart aimed at her throat. She moved with a deadly, desperate grace, her stone blade deflecting each assault with the precision of one who had honed her skill through years of survival. But the creatures were relentless, pressing closer, their mocking laughter echoing through the trees. Their numbers threatened to overwhelm her, and fatigue began to gnaw at her limbs, slowing her strikes. Just as her strength wavered, a thunderous roar shattered the air, and the ground quaked beneath a mighty tread. She spared just a glance away from her tormentors to see a towering figure burst into the clearing. Muscles rippled beneath weathered skin as he charged, his stone knife flashing in the light. With a single, devastating sweep of his war club, he sent several creatures hurtling away, their twisted bodies slamming into the trees with bone-snapping force. His presence was a storm made flesh, a whirlwind of raw power and unbridled wrath. "Hold fast," he bellowed, his voice reverberating through the clearing like a war drum. A surge of strength coursed through her at his call, a second wind ignited by the arrival of this legend. Together they fought, a storm of sinew and stone. Her spear struck true, and his war club fell with the weight of a mountain, scattering their foes in a terrified, scrambling retreat. The creatures were not without their bite, however. One of them lunged at her side, its claws raking across her arm before she drove her spear through its chest. Pain shot through her, warm blood trickling down her forearm, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to falter. Beside her, the giant swung his war club, shattering another creature, but a dart grazed his side, tearing through the skin and drawing blood. He let out a low growl, the pain fueling his fury rather than slowing him. Another sank its needle teeth into his arm as it scrambled for a foothold on his body. He hurled it away with a mighty swing of his tree-thick arm. They fought on, each bearing the marks of the struggle, her arm slick with blood, his side stinging from the shallow wound. Their strikes grew more fierce, more determined, until the creatures began to scatter, their resolve crumbling under the combined wrath of the two warriors. As some of them bounded away, their forms twisted and shimmered, morphing seamlessly into rabbits, squirrels, and coyotes, disappearing into the underbrush with uncanny swiftness. Their transformation was both mesmerizing and disquieting, a reminder of their supernatural nature and the ever-shifting danger that lurked within the forest. At last, the clearing grew silent, save for the heavy breaths of the two fighters. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. A fierce smile broke across her dirt-streaked face, defiant and victorious. He picked up one of the creatures, looked at it, and then tossed it aside. "Pukwajis," he grunted. He lifted his head and scanned for the forest for more threats. "I think that they are gone for now," the woman said. She studied the giant towering over her. "You are Wampanoag," she declared matter-of-factly. "Yes. My name is Maushop." "The Maushop," she exclaimed, eyes widening. "No," he grinned. "It is but a nickname that my village gave me due to my size, but I am no legendary giant, creator of land. My name is Wusamiquin, Yellow Feather, but I am rarely called that by anyone. I can see why they call you that. You stand head and shoulders above any warrior in my tribe." Maushop looked at the woman before him. She was a vision of timeless beauty, with deep, warm brown eyes that shone like dark pools beneath the dappled sunlight of the forest canopy. Her long, jet-black hair cascaded down her back in thick, glossy waves, sometimes adorned with delicate braids interwoven with tiny shells or beads made from bone. Her high cheekbones framed a graceful, oval face with smooth, sun-kissed skin that seemed to glow with the vitality of the earth itself. Her full lips often curved into a knowing smile, revealing a glimpse of her fierce spirit and gentle heart. She was dressed in a finely crafted deerskin dress, supple and soft, decorated with intricate beadwork in vibrant hues of red, blue, and white, forming patterns inspired by the rivers and stars. Fringes adorned the hem and sleeves of her garment, swaying gracefully with each movement. A finely woven belt of dyed porcupine quills cinched her waist, emphasizing her lithe, athletic form. Around her neck hung a necklace of polished beads. Her moccasins were adorned with delicate quillwork and lined with soft fur to keep her feet warm during long journeys through the forest. "And you are?" "I am Tahlequah, of the Pequot people." She looked down at the bodies strewn on the forest floor. "The little forest people are not usually this aggressive." "Agreed. Something has churned them up. That is why I am here, attempting to track them. I believe that they are the source of trouble between our people and the white strangers." "Your tribe is friends with those who came from the sea." "Yes. We helped them through a very difficult first winter in our lands. Trade has been good between our peoples. But now there is trouble." "How so?" He sheathed his dagger and said, "We have been planning a great harvest celebration with the white strangers, but tensions have arisen of late. One of our huts caught fire and we found one of their hats nearby. Likewise, some of their pigs were slain, found with our arrows in them." "Did your tribe attack their animals?" "No," he shook his head, his black mane swaying side to side. "I suspected these pucks." "I found this at the burned-out hut," he said as he reached his hand into the pouch at his side. He extracted a small flint dart. Tahlequah bent and picked up a matching dart from the hand of a dead creature at her feet. "It's a match." "Yes. I think that they are trying to sow discord between us." "Why?" "They are usually elusive creatures who stick to themselves unless we molest them or their trees." "Yes. Normally so. But like I said, something has them stirred up. Why are you out here?" She shifted her foot and said, "I am looking for our shaman. He disappeared from our village a while ago." "By yourself?" "No, I was with 2 others, but we were attacked by the little forest people a few days ago," she answered, then looked down. "I lost both of them in the fight." "And you pressed on alone? That is very dangerous." "Yes, but I am determined to find our shaman." "Well, perhaps our tasks are joined together. Are you willing to press on with me? I know that our peoples have not always been friends. You seem to be an honorable warrior. And you have already demonstrated your willingness to help me at your own risk." She paused and looked at him. "Yes, let us join forces." Asterisk. They moved deeper into the forest, shadows thickening around them as the sun dipped beyond the horizon. The silence was heavy, thick with the scent of earth and damp leaves. They walked cautiously, their steps sure but measured, their eyes scanning for movement in the twilight. "This land is unknown to me," Tahlequah whispered, her voice barely breaking the silence. Her eyes swept the twisted, gnarled trees, branches like skeletal fingers reaching toward them. "I have not traveled this far before." "Nor have I," Maushop admitted, his gaze hard. "There is something here, a presence. As if the forest itself has eyes." Tahlequah nodded, unease written across her face. "Yes, I feel it too. It watches, waiting." The forest sloped upwards, leading them to a steep incline, the ground treacherous beneath their feet. At the summit, they paused. An abandoned village lay before them, perched on a rocky cliff, its structures broken and empty. Crumbling huts, weathered carvings stripped by the years, and an eerie wind whistling through the hollow ruins, the village was a relic of forgotten days. Tahlequah stepped forward, awe and sorrow coloring her expression. "Who lived here?" she whispered, touching the rough wood of a fallen beam. "It has been empty a long time. No one speaks of this place," Maushop murmured. "It is as if it has vanished from memory and lore." A mist rolled in, creeping up the cliffside, wrapping the village in a cold shroud. The temperature plummeted, and Tahlequah shivered. The fog thickened, swallowing the world in gray. "This is not natural," Maushop growled, his grip tightening on his war club. "Stay close." The whispers began, a faint, mournful sound, growing louder as the mist swirled. Tahlequah strained to hear, her heart pounding. "Do you hear it?" Maushop nodded, his face dark. "We are not alone." Suddenly, the creatures struck. Shadows leaped from the mist, their gray forms darting in and out like phantoms. Maushop swung his club, each blow felling an enemy, but they were relentless, the mist twisting their shapes, making them illusions. Tahlequah fought beside him, her spear cutting through the fog, but soon they were separated, the mist swallowing them. "Tahlequah," Maushop roared, his voice muffled, drowned by the mist. "Maushop," she cried, her voice trembling as the shadows closed in. The creatures drove between them, pushing him apart, her form fading, swallowed by the fog. Then came her scream, raw and filled with terror. Maushop lunged towards the sound, but the mist took her, her voice fading into silence. "Tahlequah," he bellowed, his heart pounding, fear clawing at him. He heard only the faintest struggle before all was quiet. Rage filled him, a blind fury. He swung his war club, scattering the remaining pucks, but the mist held no answers. The whispers ceased, the village was empty once more, and Maushop stood alone, the cold mist curling around him like the grasp of a ghost. Maushop bounded through the mist-filled village, his breath coming in low, steady growls. His eyes scanned the thick fog, searching for any sign of Tahlequah, but the mist twisted shapes and shadows, obscuring everything. His heart pounded, fear and fury clashing within him. The village was a maze, each crumbling hut and weathered carving a specter of forgotten days. Then, he caught a glimpse, a dark shape moving through the fog. He rushed towards it, muscles surging as he ran. But as he neared, the shape vanished, leaving only silence and the oppressive mist. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a large, ancient tree. Its bark was twisted and gnarled, and an opening yawned in its side, an opening large enough for a man to enter. The hollow seemed to breathe, the mist curling around it like smoke. Maushop approached cautiously, his war club held at the ready, his instincts screaming of danger. He stepped closer, peering into the dark hollow. The air was thick and cold, and the ground beneath the tree seemed to pulse, as if alive. He moved to investigate, his footfalls silent, the warrior's instinct guiding his every motion. Without warning, the tree moved. Branches shot out, their twisted forms striking with the speed of serpents. Maushop barely had time to react, his war club coming up to block the first blow, the force of it sending him stumbling back. Another branch lashed out, catching him across the shoulder, pain flaring as the bark scraped his skin. He roared, his stone knife flashing as he slashed at the offending branch. The wood shrieked, a sound like creaking timber and snapping roots. The tree seemed to come alive, its branches writhing and lashing, each one striking with malevolent intent. Moushop fought with all the fury of a cornered beast. His war club shattered branches, his knife gashing the twisting wood, but the tree was relentless. It struck again, wrapping a branch around his leg, pulling him off balance. He fell, his back slamming into the cold earth, the mist swirling around him. With a bellow of rage, Moushop twisted, his muscles wreathed like serpents as he tore the branch away. He surged to his feet, his eyes blazing. He swung his war club with all his might, the blow splintering the branch that reached for his throat. The tree shuddered, its branches recoiling, and for a heartbeat, the world was still. Moushop stood, chest heaving, his war club raised, ready for another attack. The tree seemed to wither, its branches retreating, the hollow dark and empty once more. The mist swirled, thick and cold, but the ancient tree no longer moved. Moushop stepped back, his eyes never leaving the twisted bark. He breathed deeply, his heart still pounding, his senses alert for any further movement. What kind of witchery is this? He muttered to himself. Moushop took a deep breath and, despite the throbbing ache of his wounds, cautiously stepped forward again. This time, he moved into the hollow of the tree. The darkness enveloped him, the air filled with an ancient, almost sacred stillness. Inside, his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the bark. The interior was like stepping into the world of a forgotten shaman. Shelves carved into the tree's walls were lined with items, small clay figures, bundles of herbs tied with sinew, feathers hanging from twisted roots above, and animal bones arranged in deliberate patterns. Rattles made from gourds and woven charms hung in clusters, their beads clinking softly with each subtle movement of the tree. Strange symbols were etched into the wood, their meaning lost to all but those who had once lived in this place. A collection of stone tools, some stained with dried pigment, lay scattered on the floor beside a worn deer-hide drum. The smell of sage and something more pungent filled the air. Moushop felt a strange unease settle over him, as if the tree itself were alive with memory, of rituals performed long ago, of songs sung to the spirits. He could feel the weight of the history, of knowledge accumulated and now left forgotten in this hollow, like a temple turned to ruin. He reached out, his hand brushing a feathered talisman that swayed gently in the dim light. This place was old magic, a place of power, and Moushop knew that whatever secrets it held might be key to understanding what had stirred the Pucks and taken Tahlequah. But before he could examine further, a noise, faint and distant, a muffled cry, reached his ears. Moushop's eyes narrowed. As he examined the hollow further, he noticed a crack in the ground, almost hidden beneath the shadows of the tree's roots. The crack was wide enough for a man to slip through, and below, he could see a faint, eerie glow emanating from the depths. His instincts screamed of danger, but the thought of Tahlequah pushed him forward. He crouched and peered into the crevice, then began to lower himself down. The earth felt cold against his hands as he descended, the air growing cooler and more oppressive. His feet found purchase on rough stone, and he dropped into a cavern below. The cavern was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness. The glow came from luminescent fungi clinging to the walls, casting flickering light across the chamber. Strange markings were etched into the rock, similar to those carved into the tree above, symbols of power and ritual. More shamanic items were scattered around, some arranged in a deliberate circle, others lying haphazardly as if abandoned in haste. Maushop felt the weight of the place, an ancient power, raw and untamed. He moved cautiously, his eyes scanning for any sign of Tahlequah or the creatures that had taken her. The air was thick, almost stifling, and every step he took echoed through the chamber, as if the cavern itself were alive and listening. Tahlequah woke with a start, her head pounding, the cold stone beneath her. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim glow emanating from patches of luminescent fungi scattered across the walls. The cavern was vast, shadows clinging to its edges, and she could hear the faint drip of water echoing in the distance. Slowly, she pushed herself upright, her hands brushing against the coarse stone floor. Across the cavern, a figure stood, cloaked in darkness. His presence was unmistakable. Wutuanash, the shaman of her tribe, the one she had been searching for. He stood before a rough stone altar, his arms raised as he muttered incantations in a language that seemed older than the earth itself. Tahlequah narrowed her eyes, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Wutuanash, she called, her voice hoarse but steady. What are you doing here? The shaman turned, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His face was gaunt, his expression twisted with an intensity that Tahlequah had never seen before. He lowered his arms, his gaze locking onto her. A smile curled at the corners of his lips, a smile that held no warmth. Tahlequah, he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. You should not have followed me. She pushed herself to her feet, her muscles aching. I had to. You went missing. We didn't know where you had gone or what had happened to you. She glanced around the room again, her eyes moving over the various items scattered about. A circle of charred bones lay on the floor, surrounded by symbols drawn in ash. Feathers, stained with dried blood, hung from the ceiling, swaying gently as if touched by an unseen breeze. Animal skulls rested on shelves, their hollow eyes staring back at her. She could smell herbs burning, a pungent mix that made her stomach turn. It all clicked into place. Her eyes widened with realization, and her breath caught in her throat. You're causing all of this, aren't you? The Pukwudgies, the attacks on the Wampanoag and the White Strangers. Why, Wutuanash? The shaman stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Why? He echoed, his voice dripping with disdain. Because our people have been overlooked for too long. The Wampanoag, the White Strangers, they grow stronger while we fade into the shadows. I will not let that happen. With my magic, I will turn the little forest people against them, sow division and discord. And when they are weak, we, the Pequot tribe, will rise and conquer them both. Tahlequah shook her head, her expression one of disbelief. This isn't the way, Wutuanash. It is wrong, and the spirits will not bless you for this treachery. Wutuanash's eyes darkened, and he stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The spirits have already blessed me, Tahlequah. They gave me power beyond anything I ever dreamed. And, he paused, eyes drinking her in, they gave me you. Tahlequah felt her stomach turn, an icy dread settling in her chest. What do you mean? Wutuanash's gaze roamed over her, his smile widening. I have watched you since you were young, Tahlequah. Your spirit, your strength. You were always meant to be mine. Your coming here is a sign from the spirits. You are to be mine. Together, we will lead our people to greatness. A cold fury rose within Tahlequah, and she clenched her fists. I will never be yours, Wutuanash. What you're doing is wrong. This isn't about our people. It's about your own twisted desires and thirst for power. The shaman's expression hardened, the warmth in his eyes turning to ice. You will change your mind, Tahlequah. In time, you will see that this is the only way. Tahlequah took a step back, her eyes never leaving his. I will never stand with you in this madness. I will fight you, Wutuanash. For our people, for what is right. The shaman let out a low, mirthless laugh. You may try, Tahlequah, but you will find that there is no escape from this place. You belong to me now. Asterisk. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the cavern, growing louder with each passing moment. Maushop came bounding into the cavern, his eyes blazing with fury. He took in the scene in an instant, Tahlequah facing a strange man, dressed like a shaman, the tension thick between them. Tahlequah didn't hesitate. She lunged at the shaman, her body fueled by desperation and rage. Wutuanash moved to counter her, his hands gripping her wrists, forcing her down. She struggled, her heart pounding as she fought against his iron grip. But before Wutuanash could subdue her completely, Maushop roared and charged forward. He knocked Wutuanash aside with a powerful blow, sending the shaman sprawling across the cavern floor. Tahlequah scrambled to her feet, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Wutuanash rose, his eyes filled with hatred, but before he could react, a new threat entered the cavern. The ground seemed to tremble as something massive, larger than any creature they had faced before, emerged from the shadows. Its form was hulking and twisted, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It let out a guttural growl as it fixed its gaze on Maushop, and only then did Tahlequah realize it was a Pukwudgie. But far larger and more dangerous than any they had seen before. The giant creature lunged at Maushop, its claws slashing through the air. He dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. He swung his war club with all his strength, striking the creature's side. The giant roared in pain, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. As Maushop fought the monster, Tahlequah turned her attention back to Wutuanash. The shaman had regained his footing, and his eyes burned with fury. He raised his hands, chanting in the ancient language, and Tahlequah knew she had to act fast. She grabbed a stone dagger from the ground and charged at him. Wutuanash moved to defend himself, but Tahlequah was relentless. She slashed at him, her movements swift and precise. The shaman stumbled backward, his incantation faltering as he tried to ward off her attacks. Meanwhile, Maushop grappled with the beast, his muscles straining as he fought to keep the creature at bay. Its claws raked across his arm, drawing blood, but the warrior roared in defiance. With a mighty swing of his war club, he struck the creature's head, the force of the blow causing it to stagger. Tahlequah and Wutuanash continued their struggle, their movements a blur of strikes and counterstrikes. In a sudden move, the shaman grabbed a ceremonial spear from a nearby table, using it to block her attacks and strike back with renewed vigor. Tahlequah dodged and weaved, her determination unwavering. Finally, she found an opening. She drove her dagger into Wutuanash's side, and the shaman let out a strangled cry, collapsing to the ground. With earth-shattering force, Maushop delivered his ultimate blow, a strike that seemed to draw power from the ancient spirits themselves. The giant Puck's massive form shuddered and swayed, its fearsome presence diminishing as a sound like distant thunder rumbled from its throat. The beast's legs buckled, and its colossal frame crashed to the cavern floor with such impact that stalactites trembled overhead, showering dust and stone upon its now lifeless body. In death, the once mighty creature looked smaller somehow, like a dark mountain crumbling into the shadows. Tahlequah stood over Wutuanash, her chest heaving as she looked down at him. The shaman's eyes flickered, and a twisted grin spread across his face. Blood bubbled at his lips as he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "You may have won here, Tahlequah, but it is too late. I have sent another one of my giants to the White Strangers, and it carries a Wampanoag war emblem. They will think it was his tribe that sent him," he sputtered, pointing at the warrior. He coughed up blood, and then his eyes went dark as he exhaled his last spittle-rattled breath. His hand remained a claw with one finger still pointing at Maushop. Tahlequah's eyes widened, her heart sinking at his words. The shaman let out a final, rasping breath, his body going limp. She turned to Maushop, her expression filled with a mix of triumph and dread. "We have to warn him," she said, her voice urgent. "We can't let his plan succeed." Maushop nodded, his face grim. "Then we must move quickly. There is no time to lose." Together, they found that the cavern exited onto the back side of the cliff that the village sat upon. They got their bearings and plunged into the woods towards the direction of the white settlers. Maushop and Tahlequah raced through the woods, the dark forest alive with danger as enraged Pukwudgies emerged from the shadows to block their path. The creatures moved with unnatural speed, their glowing eyes filled with malice. Maushop swung his war club with practiced precision, each blow sending a Pukwudgie crashing into the underbrush. Tahlequah fought beside him, her dagger flashing in the dim light as she slashed at the creatures, their shrill cries echoing through the forest. They moved with urgency, knowing that every moment lost brought the White Strangers closer to disaster. The forest seemed endless, each shadow a potential threat, but they pressed on, their determination unwavering. The closer they got to the pilgrims' settlement, the louder the sounds of chaos became, shouts, gunfire, and the unmistakable roar of the giant creature. Bursting through the tree line, they arrived at the edge of the pilgrims' stockade. The giant Puck was already there, with a swarm of smaller ones, its massive form battering the wooden walls, each strike sending splinters flying. The White Strangers were firing their muskets, their faces pale with fear. One of the settlers landed a shot on a Puck attempting to crawl through the gap created by the giant. The force of the bullet drove its splattered body into the mass of creatures behind it. Maushop let out a battle cry and charged forward, drawing the creature's attention away from the stockade. The giant turned, its glowing eyes narrowing as it let out a guttural roar. It lunged at him, its claws swiping through the air, but he was ready. He dodged to the side, his war club coming down hard on the creature's arm, the force of the blow making it recoil in pain. While Maushop battled the giant, Tahlequah moved swiftly along the perimeter of the stockade. The gray creatures were attempting to scale the walls, their claws digging into the wood as they hissed and snapped at the settlers. Some made it through the jagged gap in the wall. Tahlequah leapt after them. One of the settlers, struggling to reload his musket, was attacked by one of the small beasts, its claws reaching for his throat. Tahlequah lunged forward, her dagger flashing as she drove it into the creature, saving the man just in time. She struck with deadly accuracy, her dagger plunging into the back of another creature before she spun and slashed at yet another. She moved like a shadow, her focus solely on protecting the settlers and stopping the attack. The earth itself seemed to tremble as Maushop and the giant Puck clashed. Though the creature's strength was monstrous, Maushop's will was unbreakable. He circled the beast, drawing its attention while searching for an opening. From atop the stockade wall, a settler took aim with trembling hands. The musket's report cracked through the night like thunder, the lead ball tearing into the creature's shoulder. The Puck stumbled, roaring in pain and fury, its guard momentarily broken. The giant warrior seized his chance. With the speed and grace of a mountain lion, he vaulted onto the creature's massive back, stone knife flashing in the light. The beast thrashed and howled, trying to dislodge him, but Maushop's grip was iron. His blade plunged deep into the base of the creature's skull, again and again, until the monster's final roar died in its throat. It crashed to the ground with an earth-shaking impact, its massive form going still as Maushop leapt clear. Tahlequah, having dispatched the last of the smaller beasts, rushed to Maushop's side. Together, they stood before the bewildered and terrified settlers, their weapons still in hand. One of the settlers, a man with a worn face and a musket in hand, stepped forward. What is happening? What are these creatures? Tahlequah took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched across her face. These creatures were sent to cause chaos, to make you believe that the Wampanoag are your enemies. But it is not true. The one behind this was a shaman of my people, driven by hatred and a desire for power. He sought to pit us against each other. Maushop nodded, his gaze meeting the eyes of the settlers. We have fought to stop this madness. We came here to warn you. The Wampanoag are not your enemies. There are forces at work that wish to see us all destroyed. We must stand together, or we will fall apart. The settlers exchanged uneasy glances, the tension in the air palpable. Finally, the man with the musket lowered his weapon, his expression softening. You saved us. Perhaps there is truth in your words. We will listen. Suddenly, the sound of movement in the forest drew everyone's attention. From the shadows of the trees, many members of the Wampanoag tribe emerged, their expressions wary and confused. At their head was the chief, his stern eyes scanning the scene before him, the battered stockade, the fallen creatures, and Maushop standing alongside Tahlequah. Massasoit, the chief, stepped forward, his gaze narrowing on Maushop. Maushop, he said, his voice filled with both surprise and suspicion. What is the meaning of this? These creatures, what are they doing here, and why are you here? Maushop met the chief's gaze, his voice steady. These creatures were sent to sow discord between us and them, he said, pointing at the settlers. They were controlled by Wutuanash, who sought to use them to turn us against each other. He wished to see our people and the settlers at war, so that he could seize power. The chief's eyes widened, and he looked to Tahlequah for confirmation. She nodded, her expression earnest. It is true. Wutuanash was consumed by his hatred. He wanted to destroy any chance of peace between us. But we fought him, and now he is no more. We came here to stop his plan before it was too late." The chief was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the faces of the settlers and his own people. Finally, he nodded slowly, a look of relief crossing his features. "You have done well, both of you. It seems we have all been caught in a web of lies and deceit. But now we must move forward, together." He turned to the settlers, his voice strong. "We came here today to ensure that no harm would come to you, and it seems Maushop and Tahlequah have already done that. Let us not let the actions of one madman destroy what we have worked for. Let us continue with our plans, for a festive meal, a celebration of peace and friendship." The settlers exchanged glances, and then William Bradford, their leader, nodded. He was a sturdy man with sharp eyes that spoke of both weariness and determination. His hair, once dark, was now streaked with gray, and his face was lined with the hardships of leading his people in a foreign land. Despite his stern appearance, there was a warmth in his gaze as he looked between the Wampanoag and his own settlers, recognizing the chance for a fragile but hopeful peace. "Yes, yes, let us do that. Perhaps this is a chance for a new beginning." A murmur of agreement spread through both groups, and slowly, the tension began to ease. Maushop turned to Tahlequah. "Well," he said with a grin, "would you like to help me hunt for deer tomorrow for the feast?" "Of course. Someone has to be there to show you how to actually sneak up on a deer instead of charging it like a bear."